Hey everyone, so the question of the hour is to outline or not to outline. Now that you've gotten your query written and your blurb, your concept for your book, this is a tool that I discovered 4 years ago in the creation of my newest manuscript. As many of you know, this is my 7th novel. I have 4 urban fantasy. It's an entire series that I wrote. Within 1 year, I wrote 4 novels back to back. Each one of them 400 pages. After that, I wrote a post-apocalyptic science fiction book that was an extension of that series. That one's 400 pages. All of them have an extensive world building. And prior to those, I had written a middle grade fantasy, what I will call, it was an urban fantasy as well. So this is spanning from the age of 27 to now. And this novel is the first novel that I approached in this way after taking a master class. And I know when we all hear the word outline, what do? It's like, nope, I work from inspiration. I am a creator. When I think of an outline, I think of my history paper in high school where I was using Roman numerals and having to figure everything out ahead of time. That just isn't the case with what I'm getting ready to tell you. It's actually a lot of fun. And the point that I want to make here before I go into this any further, for those that are still on the fence, because I followed this format and outlined my book this way, I was able to be told by Jessie Stover 6 months ago that basically my novel needed to be rewritten. It was written from 6 points of view. And that just wasn't going to fly, not for a YA novel. And I had to basically rethink my entire manuscript that I just spent 4 years polishing and writing. If I had not constructed my manuscript using this format, because I had such a strong, solid skeleton, such an understanding of the structure of the story, I was able to rewrite a book that took me 4 years to flesh out in under 4 months. So, and that is directly in result of following this process that I'm getting ready to tell you about. So many of you have read my synopsis or my blurb, and the only thing that you need to know for this is where I began with my outline was my book has a ticking time clock. It's a thriller. And my main character has 6 days to figure this problem out. And so I started right there at the basics. I broke my book up into days, day 1 through day 6. You know, you see some books, it's part 1, part 2, part 3. You may have that kind of structure in your story and you may not, but that is where I began with my outline. So what I learned with the outline is it's really basic. You start with chapter 1 and you are writing, literally tuning into just the most important plot point of that chapter. It's really almost like writing a movie script. It's dialogue and action. So that's going to be what I call the skeleton of the story, the bones of the story. So chapter 1, where you begin, and you just follow through chapter by chapter. Because hopefully at this point, you know, before you're even sitting down to write this chapter by chapter outline, you have your main characters figured out, you have your concept and what the overall intention of the story is. If you don't, that's a problem. And that's why writing the query first, and we all took the pledge to do so, is really important. So, you've got your concept, you start on chapter 1. You may have broken your book up into days. The reason that I did this was I wanted to have a certain amount of chapters per day, so that I understood that by day 5, I should be hitting the climax of my story. I should be getting very close to what we call, you know, all the twists starting to get revealed, the red herrings in a thriller for my particular genre. And day 6 would be more of the resolution of my story. And then I was able to break up, so each day has between 10 to 15 chapters each. So if you don't have that type of a format, if you don't have, maybe your book takes place in 24 hours, maybe it takes place over the span of a year, I do suggest sitting down and figuring out your timeline so that you can allot a certain amount of time to each part of your book. It's not necessary to do this, but I think it's a really great place to start. So, like I said, the only thing you're doing is tuning in. So this is where the planster and the panster come together. It really is the best of both worlds. You're being creative, so you're shooting in. For me, I hear it like it's I'm tuning in and I'm listening in on some secret conversation. I am just documenting a movie. That is how it plays out in my mind. So you're still getting that creative burst. Here's what's great about doing it this way. You can move these pieces around. So it's like clay in your hands before it hits the kiln. Once you start writing chapters, adding descriptions, backstory, and all of this stuff that we tend to do when we're just going by inspiration, we end up writing in a lot of material that we don't need. We have no direction with it. And this is where we run into the dreaded plot is just dragging. Where is this going? So from the first page of this book, I knew what I was doing. I had authority and intention because I had created this master map for me to follow. With that said, I moved pieces around. I was able to also tinker with and play with in the developmental stages which chapters belonged where, and things were moved around like pieces on a chessboard. It just gave me a lot more authority and commanding over the storytelling. So that's why I'm really going to encourage any writer that's listening to this now, particularly in my Pitch to Publish group, that you really consider at least trying this with your newest material. Taking your query, figuring out your timeline, maybe breaking your book up into segments that are easy to digest, that make sense with your story, and then sitting down, chapter 1, all you're going to do is write a blurb. It's not going to be very much. It is only the plot point, whether it is revealing something internal about your main character, emotions, or it's some high action. And this is another thing that you have control of. You do not want to have too many high action scenes, chapters, back to back. You exhaust your reader. And so you want to be able to create a balance between the emotional character arc and the internal reflection, and then the external action and dialogue. And then you also don't want to get caught up in when you're having too much of the emotional arc and the plot is dragging. So this really allows you the luxury of getting an idea and laying that solid foundation. Think of it as constructing a house, a skeleton, and then layer by layer. Now, once you have this laid out, you're going to go in once you have your outline, and what are you going to do? You're going to flesh out around that plot point. Now, that plot point in each chapter, some of them may begin in the beginning of the chapter. Some of them might be you're shooting into the middle of the chapter. Some of them might be the end of that chapter, but the point is you know what the point is of that chapter. So then you're just going to go in and fill in. I always start my books like a movie script, dialogue and action. And then you can go in layers. You go in, I call it the layer of description. You know, that's something I go in where now I'm only laying in descriptions where they're needed, where I feel like they're needed, laying in backstory. So that was another thing that Jessie Stover really helped me discover, was where I was still using a little bit too much backstory in the showing versus telling. You want to have both of those, as a matter of fact. You can't have all showing. You are a storyteller. There's got to be a beautiful balance. It's like having the external conflict balanced with the internal conflict, the internal dialogue balanced with the external dialogue. These are the books that make, for me, great reading. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask. But I think that about sums up, and I might make another video going into even more detail if it's necessary. But yeah, I really want to encourage everyone to give this kind of an outline a chance. It's a lot of fun, and it's going to give you a lot more control from your opening page to your ending in mastering your story. Best of luck.